a short story by Paul McCann entitled Kitch. Kitch was a happy-go-lucky lad in his youth with a devil-may-care attitude about things. He left school early and spent a lot of time chasing girls, going to parties, and in between he played football for his hometown Albertville. After every game he enjoyed a drink with the teammates. Kitch soon found himself a regular job in the centre cellars working as a kitchen hand. As time passed they offered him an apprenticeship as a chef, where he soon found his way through the kitchen and had a great passion for cooking. One of his greatest abilities was in creating meals out of nothing, and the end product was astonishing. It was not long before he earned a reputation as being one very famous cook. Many of the top restaurants had tried to persuade him to work for them, but Kitch was loyal and happy where he was. Another reason why Kitch remained there at the centre cellars was a particular young girl who delivered the fresh fish from the market every day. Her name was Sally, but he called her his fishy dishy. It was only a matter of time when love took hold of him and he asked Sally to be his wife. For 3 years they stayed together and were very, very happy as a couple. And then suddenly tragedy struck. One afternoon in the back alleyway, Sally was on her way to bring in the order of seafood for the day when she walked into a dispute between a group of young men. A gun was produced and a shot fired. Sally was killed by a ricochet bullet that was meant for someone else. People said that Kitch had died with her that day. He had withdrawn from life completely afterwards and was rarely ever seen. His disappearance was felt by many people, for he was well liked and respected in Albertville. Suddenly, after 10 years, Kitch resurfaced and started to work in a few of the local fast food joints. He was now just a shadow of the person who he once was. His hair was straggly, long and grey. His face was covered with these deep tracks, gouges of life and suffering. His 2 eye sockets were dark, lifeless holes. Kitch worked away night after night, making burgers and hot dogs for the usual street people, passers-by, on the hot grill, staring into nowhere, losing himself in memories of what had been. One stormy night, Kitch had finished his shift and was walking home down the same alleyway where his darling Sally was shot dead, and suddenly a bolt of lightning struck an electric sign nearby, which caused all the lights to black out for a moment. Then, as quickly as they went out, they flickered back on again. As the lights came back on, he heard a car screech to a stop, and at the end of the alley, they came rushing up. A girl first, then 3 men behind her. They were chasing her, grabbed her, and Kitch watched helpless as one of the men pointed a handgun, and before his very eyes, a shot was fired, and the girl fell to the ground at Kitch's feet. Something snapped inside Kitch. He took out a chef's knife from inside his bag and cut the throat of the killer. His accomplices fled and turned into the night. Kitch dropped out of sight again, after that night, and it was about at this time when people began to go missing from Albertville. Each week, more people disappeared without a trace. People began an investigation with the police, hunting the streets for clues, but they came up empty all of the time. Then they found a mutilated body without a head in a toilet. She was left in the cellar cafe, cool room. Another was found in an alleyway. And a third one was discovered, a headless corpse found again in the cool room of the cellar cafe. Even though the police told people to remain calm, a panic had taken over the town, and people in Albertville started to leave in their droves. With more people going missing, Albertville was fast becoming a ghost town. In a brief time, many small businesses were forced to close their doors, and one of the first businesses to close was the Cellar Cafe. Albertville now was a ghost town, and the sight of places boarded up had become a normal thing around the town. The police had never made an arrest. 10 years had passed, and with the marching on of time, a lot of the dark history behind Albertville's secret massacres and somehow had been swept under the carpet. They'd been forgotten, pushed away, out of the public eye. A wave of industry had begun to re-emerge around the outskirts of Albertville. A wealthy stockbroker had started to manufacture plastics, and a number of small factories around began to appear. An outside builder and developer by the name of McElhenney was hired to establish a housing estate for the workers who would be soon on their way to work in the new industrial estate. McElhenney saw an opportunity to get rich quick and approached a number of businessmen and politicians with his plan to rebuild Albertville. He presented his ideas with a silver tongue, and soon it was all agreed and approved. McElhenney's name was to be included in all of the properties owned by the powerful syndicate. Now times had changed, and Albertville brimmed over with a newfound confidence. There was a promise of jobs, with new developments taking place everywhere. McElhenney had a look at the boarded-up cellar where Kitch once worked. He inquired about maybe buying the site or leasing the site, and spoke to everyone in the area who seemed reluctant to talk to him about the centre cellars. He had ideas of renovating the old restaurant, bringing it more into touch with today's look. This only spurred on McElhenney's greed further and further, pushing harder and harder on the business line. He was a stubborn, arrogant man. Apart from being a shrewd businessman as well, he was driven by this enormous ego. After making a generous offer to the real estate agent, who was glad, at last, to finalise negotiations and have the paperwork signed over, so now the Cellar Cafe had a new owner and a new manager and a new name. It was now going to be known as the King's Cellars. McElhenney began to dream of all the money he was going to make. As it soon came to be, he was handed the keys to the King's Cellars and started renovations immediately. Architects arrived, and McElhenney had put his demands down, the demands of a greedy businessman who wanted to be opening up the King's Cellars within weeks. The approval of those plans had been given to the council and were approved, and McElhenney's contracts soon began to be thrown at builders all around the city. Soon he got what he wanted, and within a week workmen arrived and they began pulling down walls and putting up fixtures. The foreman soon contacted McElhenney about a strange steel container nearby that was on the site near the restaurant. Out in the back alleyway of the cafe was a mysterious steel construction. Box looked like a ship container, or a cool room, or a storage area of some kind. So McElhenney had no keys to the place and didn't know who owned it. And when he asked the real estate for the keys, he was told that the site in question was not to be included as part of the lease agreement, and a private individual owned the place. They weren't sure who the owner was. McElhenney wasn't happy about the thing that was placed there near his cafe, but there was nothing he could do about it. The container seemed to be sealed, and no one was able to open it or see inside of it. So the project for the moment with this strange steel construction was placed on hold because McElhenney was just interested in the restaurant being opened. At last, the final touches were being done to the cafe. McElhenney decided he'd start advertising for employees. Once the interviews were completed, McElhenney selected a crew of people who fitted perfectly into his operation. The kitchen staff were all willing to work as casuals and to be on call. They also had to multitask and be happy with the low wage that was on offer. So with only a few days left now until the opening day, McElhenney managed to hire everyone except for a cook. A number of people had been interviewed for the position, but none of them were accepted. McElhenney was a hard man, but he was getting desperate, and it was clear to be seen that by the way he spoke to the staff and to those who he interviewed, his rude and arrogant manner was to be highly stressed part of the territory if they were to take on the job. And one evening at dusk, McElhenney decided that he'd go and sit in the King's Cellars and spend a while in his new place. That evening, he went to the door and arrived in the silver suit and the white shoes, like King of the Cellars himself. He opened the door and quietly made his way across the floor, switching on the lights as he went, grunting as he walked across the room. There were too many empty chairs there for his liking. McElhenney made his way to the bar in the bistro and sat down, and as he did, the telephone rang. He lifted up the phone, and the lights in the cafe began to flicker on and off, on and off. "Hello?" he said. "Yeah, I can't believe you're looking for a chef," came the reply. "That's right. Who am I talking to?" he said. "I am Kitch," the caller replied. Kitch? Are you able to come in for an interview?" McElhenney said. "Sure, when?" "As soon as possible," McElhenney said. "Well, it so happens I'm in the area now." "That's great, Kitch. Come right over then." "I'll do that," the caller replied. "Okay, I'll see you soon then," McElhenney said. "You will," the caller replied, and he hung up the phone. McElhenney turned around and came face to face with Kitch. He was wearing a chef's hat and holding in his hand a mobile phone and in the other hand a meat cleaver. "Hello, I've come about the job." McElhenney froze in fear. "What do you want?" he said. "I want your cafe," came the reply. It was then all the lights in the cafe started to flicker again on and off, and between the opaque light and darkness, Kitch was there, swinging his meat cleaver. With the lights flickering and the screams and the blood flowing over the floor, soon the headless body of McElhenney was lying there in a pool of blood, motionless, and Kitch dragged the body across the floor into the corner, where he opened up a little trap door and dragged the body of McElhenney down the stairs into the wine cellars, where he opened up a little box and took out a large butcher's knife and began slowly and methodically to cut McElhenney down the middle, ripping open his skin like a tin of sardines, pulling out this and that, and breaking bones as he proceeded to hoist the remains up onto a hook that was suspended from a chain fixed to a pulley on the rafters of the wine cellar roof. When opening night came around, Kitch explained to the understaffed kitchen crew that the boss, Michael Hannay, had given him total control of the King's cellars to him. The new kitchen staff never contested Kitch's authority one iota. The first two customers walked through the door of the newly opened King's cellars, and each of them were holding a bottle of wine. They were brought to their table by a waiter who said, "We do have a wine cellar here," they replied. "Yeah, we know. Why is there no menu on the table?" The waiter went red in the face and said, "I'm sorry, sir. I'll see if I can bring you one." The customer continued, "I'd like to speak with the manager, and can you bring 2 clean glasses, please?" "I'm sorry, sir, but the manager's not in this evening," the waiter replied. "Well, that's strange. Opening night, and the manager's not in sight," said the disgruntled customer. Then the front door opened, and a group of 6 people walked inside. The waiter was glad of an out from the situation and put 2 tables together and showed the large party to their chairs. Then he spun around and said, "I'll just get you those glasses." One of the large group asked, "Have you a wine list?" The waiter replied, "I'll get one for you, sir." The waiter went to the bar and returned with the wine list and 2 glasses. Suddenly Kitch appeared from nowhere. He stood there and gazed at the customers one after the other, and for a moment there was a cold chill in the air, and everyone looked at Kitch as he turned his back on them and returned to the kitchen and started screaming obscenities and foul, vulgar language. Some of the customers heard this and were a little uneasy, but the waiter improvised and said, "Don't let that worry you. He's been to some of the best restaurants. He's one of the greatest cooks in Europe." The customer settled down again. Looking for the menus, he went into the kitchen and said, "Where are the menus, Kitch?" Kitch stood there with his back to the waiter, staring into space, and then suddenly he turned around and held up the severed head of Michael Hannay. The waiter screamed, "It's the manager's special tonight," came the reply from Kitch, and the waiter screaming, who tried to run out the door, but the latches began to bolt close as if by some unseen hand. The lights in the kitchen started to flicker on and off, and when they came back on, the waiter lay there on the floor motionless, tied to a chain and dragged and gagged. He put the waiter inside the cool room along with the rest of the kitchen staff, who were also in there, tied and gagged. He closed the door on them, and Kitch soon brought out the menus to the customers and apologized, saying, "The manager's special for opening night is on the house." "What is it?" asked one of the customers. "It's a combination of beef and rice with sauce. The main ingredients are my own. Sweets afterwards are a delicacy called jelly bean ice cream." "Did you say on the house?" said one. "Yes, tonight is all for free, and you are all the lucky customers," Kitch said with a loud laugh. "Where's the waiter?" asked one of the customers. Kitch replied, He quit." Kitch pointed to the door in the corner and said, "The cellar's choice is yours. I'll bring your meals shortly." Everyone seemed easy, and one left the table and made his way to the cellar door, where he descended down the stairs. Soon he found a light switch and turned it on, and barrels and bottles of wine were on stacks in shelves and on racks covered in dust, and as if they had been there in store for years. The customer soon smelt something burning. The stench was unpleasant. As he walked up and down the aisles, the lights in the cellar began to flicker on and off. When they came back on, the customer saw blood dripping down, and then, looking up, he saw the headless and mutilated body of Michael Hannay. The customer screamed and ran for the stairs, but soon was stopped in his tracks by the sight of Michael Hannay's head sitting on a hot plate on a gas barbecue. The smell of burning hair and